everyone. All right, so I love to paint abstract landscapes, and very specifically, I love to paint or create abstract seascapes. So kind of water and sky, and that's it. And I think really if you are interested in kind of learning to paint in an abstract way, these are the perfect thing to start with because they're just so simple. So first things first is you kind of need to determine a horizon line. One thing to keep in mind, try not to put the horizon line perfectly in the middle, because if you do, it just looks boring. Either choose to have more sky or more water, but either, it doesn't matter which you choose, it's personal preference. I highly recommend painting tons and tons of these because they're really fun. They actually make great backgrounds if you're, say you paint 5 of them, you can just use 1 or 2 as a background and paint or work over top of it. I am going to choose to have less water, more sky, mostly just because I really like to paint clouds. And again, your horizon line doesn't have to be like perfectly straight, but it definitely shouldn't be tipped this way or that way. It should really kind of always be somewhat straight anyway. A little deviating from it a little bit is fine. I don't know how well you can see that. I'm just using a color erase Prismacolor pencil. You can use anything you want. I just wanted to use something that would kind of fit with my colors instead of using like a black or a graphite sort of color. So I'll make this a little darker, hopefully, so you can see it a little better. Yeah, there we go. You can see that. All right, so I'm gonna do this with the Gulfsprite or the 30 Days color palette. I hope you're not sick of this yet. Mind you, you can feel free to use any color palette you want to use. You don't have to use this one, but this is obviously a favorite for me, so it's what I'm gonna use. Excuse me. So I'm going to make my water area pink, if you can believe that, but I am going to put a little bit of this charcoal right just along the horizon, and I neglected to get a flat out, so let me get a flat brush. I am going to just kind of turn this so that I'm kind of working towards the horizon line, and I'm just going to take this color and just push it right up there. Actually put out probably more paint than I really need, which is a-okay, because this is just giving us a sense of depth here. That's all the only purpose this has, is just to give us a sense of depth. And then I am going to transition right into my deep pink. And again, if you remember, the purpley color was basically created by just blending the charcoal and the pink. So I'm actually just going to take some of that color. I have not rinsed or, washed out my brush. So I am just going to take this pink and just work it up into this kind of charcoal gray. Steal a little bit more of it. There we go. So I'm just going to work this into it so that it makes absolute sense. There we go. And then we'll just kind of start pulling it down, which will help to kind of get that blending. Get the rest of this pink that I've already put out moving around. I'm going to put more out. Can never have too much. Oops. You can never have too much hot pink. All right, so I'm going to move this all over the place. I did get it up here in my sky a little bit. That's fine. Now right here, I'm gonna have a little bit of a transition issue because this pink is not very opaque. So how to get around that? Easy. Let's get some white and we'll incorporate that down here like this. And then we'll just slowly work it up like so. And then once this pink has and white has kind of dried, we'll come back in with our hot pink, our accent, or not accent, but our brightest pink. We'll come and we'll work a little bit of it back into it, but we'll let this dry first. And now we can kind of work on the sky portion. So I'm actually just going to turn it around so that I'm working towards the horizon line yet again. And I do want my darkest of my color that goes up here. I'm carefully rinsing this brush even though it's not the one I'm going to paint with, but I want to try to get as much of that dark out as I can. Okay, so I'm using this minty green mix. You can use any light green that you have on hand. I'm actually going to introduce just a basic medium green. This is called Kelly green, but it's just a medium green. I'm going to put some of this off to the side here because I do want a slightly darker. I could just mix the pavement in, which is an excellent idea because it keeps my colors very consistent. But in this case, I'm just going to cheat and use that Kelly green. So I'm going to pick up some of this mint, excuse me, and I'm going to blend that into that green, and then I'm just carefully going to come along and introduce this color into my painting. Here we go. Get the last little bit of it down on the paper. And then I'm gonna just immediately start working into my lighter green. The color that I absolutely do not want to use in this is white. Goodness, I'm having throat issues today. Let me have a little coffee, maybe that will help. Okay, hopefully that works. So I really want to stay away from introducing white into this for reasons that you'll see here in a minute. I'm going to let the top of this kind of blend into this, goodness, this yellow. So I'm gonna move this around really quickly before it gets a chance to dry. It's mingling with that little bit of green that's on the brush still, but that's great because this is, again, you know, this is my sky, and these colors all make up my sky, so that's fine. I'm gonna go back to my mint, and before this yellow can dry, I'm going to introduce the minty color into it. And blend, blend, blend. It is not imperative that you have this well blended. I like to do this. I've been doing it for so long. But if you find that that's something that, you know, you're not capable of at this point, don't worry about it. Just put it, even if you just put them down, just like slap them down, it'll be fine. I mean, you know, like really kind of mix it up, it'll be fine. You can make a bunch of these and work on your blending skills if you want. I will say that I find adding a little bit of retarder into my paint mixes helps with that. It really kind of encourages paint to sort of blend nicely together. So if you don't have any retarder, I would recommend looking into getting a little bit of paint retarder. The one I use is missing in action. I don't know where the tube is, but it's just a either golden or Liquitex paint retarder. It's a clear gel-like medium that you could just kind of add into your paint mix. All right, so we're going to turn this back around, and we're going to paint a slightly stormy, cloudy sea, or yeah, sky. Actually, let's get our hot pink back in while we let this top sort of dry a little bit. So I'm gonna get that brush that I was using before. I'm just gonna paint from the cap on this. So I just want to introduce a little bit more of my super vibrant pink. Make sure that I get some of that in here. And because this color is very transparent, it actually makes it really super easy to blend again and bring the, introduce this color in, because it's not an incredibly opaque color, which I think is, in my opinion, a selling point to working with craft acrylics if you're just working in an art journal where it's really not imperative that you have a high quality, high pigmented paint. So in this case, the fact that these craft acrylics are not very opaque actually works kind of in our favor. All right, so we've got our bright punch of pink, which I really kind of wanted. So now I'm going to work on my clouds, and this is a little damp still, but I think it'll be okay. I'm gonna start with that sort of light gray, and I am gonna squeeze, if I can, squeeze some of it out. Let me bang this on the table. Hold on. All right, sorry about that. So I'm gonna get a little tiny bit of this out because I really don't want nor need a lot of it. I just want a little bit. And I'm gonna add white to it. And I'm going to mix. I really should start using my palette knives for this, but I'm kind of lazy. There we go. And I like to use a round when I'm painting clouds. You can paint clouds in any way. There are a million different ways to paint clouds, and clouds come in a bunch of different shapes and sizes. So paint whatever clouds you like to look at. That's kind of how I look at it. The closer to the horizon, the larger you want them to be. The further up, the farther away they are, generally. So the smaller they can be there. And this is my sort of dark under cloud layer. So I'm going to have a couple of little ones, maybe here and maybe here. So this is kind of the bottom of my cloud, really. And then I will have one larger, closer up sort of cloud that's kind of in your face. So he's a lot closer to us than these other ones. He's going to be a lot bigger. Apparently he's a boy. All right. And I like my clouds to have kind of those little trails. I don't know what kind of clouds these are. They might not even actually represent a real cloud at all, but they're my clouds. So now I'm going to go into straight white. This is the reason why I didn't incorporate any white into the rest of it, because I really want the white for my clouds to be quite impressive. I want super fun, interesting clouds. So I am just going to randomly put my white in. I'm going to do 2 layers of this, so the first layer can kind of intermix and mingle with the gray a bit, and that will be fine. But the second layer that I do, I do want that to be a nice sort of fresh white that's kind of crisp and clean. So I will let this dry a bit. And I mean, I like my clouds as well to not be neat. I don't want hard sort of crisp edges. I want things to break out and move around, because I think, for me anyway, that makes a better realism. It makes a Gulfsprite cloud. How's that? It's so hard to articulate. I am not trying to necessarily replicate realism in any shape or form, but I was definitely one of those kids, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, who spent an inordinate amount of time sitting outside, because I was from Florida. To get away from your parents, you're really just outside. You don't have basements and attics and things like that. You just get out of the house. And I was an avid reader, so I would escape to the outdoors somewhere in the yard or a park, or hang out at the school playground area, and I would read. And a lot of that time would be, if not actively reading, then kind of staring off at the sky, the bright blue sky, passing the time. So that was my childhood, so to speak, once I was old enough to read and stuff. So I like to paint a lot of clouds because it reminds me of when I was a kid. Okay, and then the final thing, and you don't have to do this, but it is really kind of fun. I'm going to get this really light pink that I already actually happen to have, and I am going to try to sort of imagine where these... Oof, I'm just painting green all over everything, all over my shirt. Anyway, I kind of try to imagine where I think the clouds might have been, and then I'm just going to mix this light pink with some of this white. And again, like I said, this is not by any means necessary to do. It's just super fun to kind of pretend like we are painting these clouds, reflections of these clouds. And because these are reflections in the water, I'm immediately going to rinse my brush, leave it wet with water, and do this to it, because water is generally moving. So any visual representation that you might create that is like a reflection onto the water should show some hint of movement. It shouldn't be just a mirror image. So I'm going to let those move a bit. Okay, I'm going to stop because that's not really necessary. And then I'm going to get a liner brush. These are what I love to use for creating any kind of spatter if I want it to be sort of small and well defined. And I'm going to go into that lighter pink. You can just add white to the pink you've been using. I was just kind of short-circuiting that. And I'm just going to add a little bit of spatter, mostly into my water area, but definitely a little here where my horizon is, because it's fun. And you don't want everything to be perfectly perfect, so it is nice to be able to create have some stuff going on in the background. Another fun thing you can do is, which we didn't do this time, but is when this is wet or this is wet, before you put the clouds on, you can spritz it with water, wait a minute, and the water will kind of activate the paint a little, and then lay a paper towel over it to lift off. We'll do that in a further lesson. I'll try to remember to introduce that technique into a different page. But there you go. That is the introduction, I guess you would say, to a more abstract landscape. And I'm actually going to, I've got a little bit of the charcoal pavement color out that I had out here for some other purpose. And I'm actually going to very carefully paint Did I say carefully? I needed a little water. The paint was dragging. And I'm gonna get where's that liner brush? That will work. All right, using this liner brush, just create a little boat. And I still have that gray, a little bit of it wet. So I'm gonna take that gray, I think it goes more like that. You're looking at a girl who was raised on a sailboat throughout until she was of age to go to school, and yet I can't remember how the sails would go, and I don't really feel like getting out a looking it up. And then I'm gonna take this pink and finally go back to the dark and make sure my mast is pretty crisp. And I think I'm gonna have a person right here sailing this boat. There you go. I don't know how well you can see that. I kind of feel like I should have brightened up my sails, maybe made my sails white. I'm probably making this more complicated than it needs to be, but where's the fun in not doing that? So we got some white paint. I'm gonna make these sails a little brighter. Yeah, that one stands out a little better now, doesn't it? And then I think on this one, I'm just going to do part of the sail, because they do have sails that are like designed. They have like geometric designs and stuff on them. And all good boats should have their call letters or whatever they're called. I forget what they're called now. So yeah, there you go. Okay, so we painted a little abstract boat, sailboat, into our seascape. All right, that part's not necessary. It's up to you. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. This was a quick and a fast, hopefully fast and quick one, but it is an absolute favorite of mine. I could literally do an entire journal of nothing but somewhat abstract environments, because I think that I just, being an avid reader as well, I think has something to do with this. I just feel immediately like I'm transported, almost as if I could actually start, in my imagination, I could start creating a story around that page. So yeah, things like that are definitely a favorite of mine, and I hope that you enjoyed this little sneak peek into it, and I would love to see you make a lot of these, not just one, not just do the one and move on, but make enough of them that you can kind of start to appreciate the different types of clouds and the different ways you can paint water, and using like wild colors that really don't, you would never see, I don't think, well, not really a bright pink ocean and a green and yellow sky. But yet it's super fun to paint that. Okay, thank you so much. I'll see you with the next lesson.